Thank you. Yeah. It's Monica's? Oh, okay. It's my wife.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining, even those in the upper mezzanine. Appreciate it. My name is Ryan Ovenell. I'm interim superintendent, and just want to thank everyone for taking time tonight to join us here for this talk, this book talk, but also around an important initiative. You may have seen online and in some of our communications that we've been doing a book study around Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation for the last 4 weeks. And we're able to get Katherine Martinko here tonight from Canada and to give us her expertise. Katherine is the author of Childhood Unplugged, Practical Advice to Get Kids Off of Screens and Add Balance. And so we are super excited that she's going to be able to present to us, and there'll be a little bit of time at the end for questions. So if there's things that are brewing in your mind as the talk goes on, feel free to hold those, and we'll make sure that we get to you with questions at the end. I would be remiss to not add that we started some of this initiative for 2 reasons, really. It is about our youth mental health. And secondly, it's about our movement in the high school to have instructional-free classrooms. It's absolutely not what we want. We want cell phone-free instructional time. So that is the move next year, cell phone-free instructional time next year. And trying to build a muscle and build some facts and some data around why that's a good thing and what we can do to get there in the next couple months for all of us as a community here in Stanwood-Camano. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Katherine. Katherine, I want to say thanks for you all as a community, educators, parents, community members, students, for being here tonight.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's my second time in this area. I gave a talk on Whidbey Island in Oak Harbor back in March, and I didn't expect to be back here so soon, so I'm very, very happy to be here. I almost didn't make it. The border crossing was a little sketchy yesterday. The border guard did make a joke. He sent me for secondary inspection, and then there was some jokes made about him slapping me with tariffs, and then he let me go. So here I am, thank goodness. And I very much enjoyed the book club meeting that happened just before this. So it's really wonderful to see a group that's obviously so interested in this topic and turning it into action, which is, it's one thing to think about it and whatnot, but all right. So I am going to be giving this talk to you, and then I will open it up for questions after. There's inevitably, curious questions, anecdotes, criticisms, pushback, lots of things come up over the course of this presentation, so I welcome all of that. Thank you so much for being here. So I would like to start by telling you just a little story. This was the moment for me when I realized things had gone terribly wrong. Several years ago, I got to know a woman who had just immigrated to Canada. She had a young baby that was always kind of sleepy. My baby was the same age at the time, but he made it his life's mission to evade sleep. So one day, this woman and I were sitting together in a doctor's waiting room, and she told me that she drugged her baby to keep her calm. It's common practice back home. I did it with all my other kids. It makes them so easy to manage, she told me. Then she looked at my child and she said, maybe you should try it. She told me that her supply was running low and she was going to be asking the doctor that day for a refill. Well, as you can imagine, I said, the doctor is not going to give you that. We just don't do that here in Canada. We don't sedate perfectly healthy children to make them easier to manage. It's not part of our parenting culture, I said. The woman was upset with me. She turned away, didn't want to talk to me anymore, and I was left to gaze around the waiting room. That's when I noticed that the room was silent. No one was playing with toys. All the other children who were waiting for their appointments were sitting silent, their eyeballs glued to screens, looking at tablets or smartphones, and so were their parents. So much for my defense of cultural norms. The Canadian kids were all being sedated too, just in a very different way. Now, I tell this story not to pass judgment on those parents, because I know it is difficult to manage sick children in a doctor's waiting room, but rather to paint a picture of a social experiment gone terribly wrong. When handheld devices like tablets and smartphones exploded into our lives a mere 15 years ago, they were met with enthusiasm, and it was justifiable. These things seemed like a parent's dream come true, a miraculous device capable of capturing a child's attention no matter what. But our enthusiasm has soured a little bit. We've all witnessed a few too many scenes like that doctor's waiting room, where the children are so engrossed in their screens that they are completely disconnected from everything that's going on around them. Parents are wondering, what have we lost? And more importantly, can we get it back? I'm a writer and I'm an author. My first book, Childhood Unplugged, came out in 2023. It followed a decade of work as a journalist and an editor, as well as a parenting columnist. The book has led to some wonderful collaborations, including joining Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation campaign team and contributing to the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's largest newspaper. I also write an email newsletter called The Analog Family that is on Substack. Now, my interest in digital media's effects on kids is also personal, not just professional. I have 3 sons who are 15, 13, and 10, so I'm witnessing firsthand how excessive screen time is affecting their broader generation, their peers, and their friends. And I also get to deal with their very strong opinions about not having smartphones when most of their friends do. More on that later. So how did I get on this path? Well, I was raised without TV and without internet in northern Ontario, and I have fond memories of a play-filled childhood, whereas my husband was raised on excessive TV and video games and feels that he missed out on childhood. We opted not to start down that path with our own kids, aware that it's always more difficult to claw back technology than to simply avoid introducing it in the first place. Today, I will talk to you about some of the problems associated with too much tech in kids' lives, and I will give you solid practical solutions that you can implement right away. But I am going to challenge you to do hard things. I take a harder line than most. I do not think kids should have smartphones before the age of 16. I do not think kids should be on social media before the age of 18. And I think it's up to parents to enforce these boundaries. The great rewiring of childhood, as it's called, is a serious problem that requires a serious response. So this term, the great rewiring, was coined by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. It refers to a clearly documented transformation in the way kids spend their time. There are 2 parts to it. So first, kids in the early 2000s started spending more time watching TV, surfing the net, and gaming on desktop computers using a dial-up internet connection. This was not a bad thing. This greater connectivity initially brought people together in a positive way. But then it rapidly accelerated after 2010 with the introduction of smartphones, high-speed internet, social media apps, and forward-facing cameras that allowed young people to start posting selfies. Kids began spending a lot more time online because it was so easy. Second, there was a well-intentioned but disastrous shift toward keeping kids safe and restricting their autonomy in the real world. Many parents were spooked by fear-mongering news stories and assumed that their children would attract sexual predators if they were ever left unsupervised outdoors. So with fewer playmates outside, kids started to spend more time indoors, which then became more appealing with the increased access to screen-based entertainment. If you were born before 1981, part of the Gen X or the Boomer generations, you were usually allowed to walk alone to a friend's house from the age of 6 onward. That climbed to 10 years for anyone who was born after 1995. Now, 2/3 of 10-year-olds have never even been to a park or a store by themselves. Another way to think of this great rewiring is a transition from a play-based to a phone-based childhood. The way in which many kids are raised today hardly resembles the way children were raised in the past, and that is not a good thing. Free, imaginative, unsupervised play with other kids of mixed ages is crucial for child development. Its small-scale challenges are described as an inoculation that prepares children to face larger challenges ahead. Without it, many kids are left feeling woefully unprepared for adulthood. Now, you might be worried that I'm some kind of tech-hating Luddite. I assure you I am not. But we do need to put technology in its rightful place, as a powerful tool, not a toy, nor should it be our children's primary source of entertainment. Way back in the 1st century, an ancient Greek philosopher named Epictetus lamented the human tendency to let others control our emotions. He wrote, "If your body was turned over to just anyone, you would doubtless take exception. Why aren't you ashamed that you have made your mind vulnerable to anyone who happens to criticize you so that it automatically becomes confused and upset?" I imagine that if Epictetus were sitting here tonight, he would tell us to get off our phones and start living more in the real world. He would tell us to stop trying to post perfect pictures or worry about what others are saying online. He would recognize that even if time online is not leading us to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, it's making us feel disjointed and frazzled. It's shattering our attention span. It's leaving us wondering what's real and what's fake, especially with the rise of AI. That is only going to get worse, which makes it even more important to regain control over our own minds. We should strive to be what author Cal Newport has described as a techno-selectionist, someone who carefully chooses which technologies to adopt and integrate into their life and isn't afraid to reject certain ones when they fail to add value. In effect, taking back control of our attention and our time. We can coexist, but we need to be the ones in control. Let's get a sense of just how much time kids are spending on devices. A 2023 survey found that the daily total entertainment screen time for tweens between the ages of 8 and 12 is 5.5 hours per day. For teenagers, it's 8 hours and 40 minutes, and just under 5 of those are devoted to social media platforms alone. Now, please note that this is entertainment-based screen time only. It does not include screen time used for school or for any homework or any form of necessary communication. This means that scrolling is the thing that teens are doing more than any other thing in their lives. It's more time than they're in school. It's more time than they're at a part-time job. It might be more time than they're sleeping. Half of teens say that they are online almost constantly, and when they are not looking at their phones, they're thinking about their phones. We've reached a point where 53% of teenagers would rather lose their sense of smell than their phone, and say that their phones are more important to them than meeting friends or vacationing abroad. 64% of teens would rather give up their voting rights than suspend social media use. Now, adults aren't that much better. We pick up our phones 144 times on average each day for a total of just over 4 hours, 2.5 of which are spent on social media. Just take a look at this math. So 1 hour of screen time adds up to 15 days a year. 2 hours a day is 30 days a year. 3 hours a day, 45, all the way up to 5 hours a day, which is 76 days every single year. Now imagine what you could accomplish if you reallocated a fraction of that time to something more productive or even more enjoyable. Not that every minute needs to be useful, but the things we pay attention to make us who we are. And over time, they end up comprising our entire lives. So why should we be concerned when kids spend this much time on their devices? The harms posed by a phone-based life can be divided into 2 categories, primary and secondary. Primary harms refer to the direct negative effects of excessive screen time. So these include chronic distractions from constant notifications, an increase in sedentariness, impaired sleep, exposure to cyberbullying, a diminishing capacity to read body language, to develop linguistic skills and consolidate memories, as well as exposure to disturbing content that reduces empathy. Primary harms include content that can outrage and radicalize people, along with the brain rot that comes from binging on social media reels. Secondary harms refer to everything people miss out on because they're on the screens. These are things such as forging relationships, engaging in activities that provide a sense of fulfillment, daydreaming, brainstorming, getting creative, playing outside, using your imagination. It's the sense of losing control of your time, of neglecting things that are important. Secondary harms can kick in even if the things you're doing on your phone are not bad. Your online activities could be useful, but still get in the way of you using time in other ways that have value too. So I will start by looking at some of these primary harms. So kids do not use their screen time constructively, much as you might like to believe otherwise. These are generalizations, but boys gravitate to YouTube, Reddit, online multiplayer video games, and porn. That is because these websites offer boys the agency-building activities that they crave. Things like exploring, competing, playing at war, and mastering skills. Except that it's an illusion. Boys end up feeling profoundly lonely and isolated, disconnected from others, and lacking practical skills. Girls gravitate to social media apps. This is because girls are deeply affected by visual comparison. Their aggression tends to be more relational, and these platforms make it very easy to be mean. And they are more prone to sharing emotions than boys, which these platforms reward with likes, comments, and views. The more emotional you are on social media, the more attention you get. A 2022 study in Nature Communications showed social media to be most harmful to girls between the ages of 11 and 13, and to boys between the ages of 14 and 15, which ironically is precisely when most kids start using it. These ages have been described as distinct windows of developmental sensitivity, when higher estimated social media use predicts a decrease in life satisfaction ratings a year later, and vice versa. Lower estimated social media use predicts an increase in life satisfaction ratings a year later. I like to show this slide to illustrate the power of filters on social media. Being a teenager is already tough, but girls nowadays face impossibly high beauty standards among their very own peers who use filters to transform their faces from ordinary to a hypersexualized, homogenized standard of beauty that, again, is not even real. Even more troubling, there's been a surge in injectables and plastic surgeries to create this so-called Instagram face in real life. While it doesn't hurt to have some interactions online, problems arise when that is where most of a child's social life occurs. Virtual interactions are inferior to in-person ones for a number of reasons. So first of all, they are asynchronous, which means communication happens out of sync with the other person. You can send a text, and then you may have to wait hours, days, sometimes even weeks before you get a response. Virtual interactions are disembodied, which means you miss out on the facial cues and the body language that go along with normal human communication. Virtual interactions often happen within large groups, which means that communication becomes performative, proclaiming opinions to the world up on a soapbox, exposing oneself to public backlash instead of sharing thoughts with people who genuinely care about you. Virtual communications have a low bar for entry and exit, meaning there's a lack of incentive to treat others with kindness and to repair misunderstandings. It is so easy online to ghost someone, to rage quit, to delete a profile. You can't do that quite as easily in real life. This environment has been devastating for Gen Z. Rates of anxiety and depression have surged in the years since smartphones and social media arrived, and it's not because of pandemics, climate change, school shootings, financial crises, political polarization, wars, or inequality, although all of these things certainly don't help. The timing just doesn't align, nor does it explain why preteen girls are struggling more than any other demographic, or why these trends hold across the entire Anglosphere. Rather, evidence points to something very big and very serious happening in young people's lives starting in the early 2010s, which is when smartphones and social media showed up. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 40% of American high school students in 2023 reported feeling sad and hopeless, up from 28% in 2011. Between 2010 and 2020, the suicide rate for young teens went up 167% among girls and 91% among boys. Prior, it had stayed within the same limited range since the 1980s. Self-harm rates among teens have surged. By 2022, there was a 500% increase in incidents of self-inflicted poisoning, cutting, strangling, and suffocation over the previous 9 years. Hospital admissions for eating disorders in the UK have gone up sixfold in a decade, with the contagious influence of social media often cited as a factor. Many health organizations have sounded alarms. In 2024, the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an official advisory against social media, saying, "We do not have adequate evidence to determine whether it is safe for kids." In an editorial for the New York Times, Murthy said, Why is it that we have failed to respond to the harms of social media when they are no less urgent or widespread than those posed by unsafe cars, planes, or food? Kids who spend time online are exposed to an ugly world. A report from the Center for Countering Digital Hate found that TikTok started recommending content tied to eating disorders and self-harm to 13-year-olds within 30 minutes of them signing up for the platform. And if they were identified as vulnerable users with keywords such as lose weight in their profiles, they were served far worse content, 12 times more videos on self-harm and suicide than the standard accounts. There is rampant cyberbullying, and when it happens online, there's no escape. Many kids are reluctant to tell their parents for fear that they might lose their phones. This is Kristen Bride, whose son, Carson, killed himself at 16 after being bullied on Snapchat. She wrote a moving essay for After Babel, saying that Carson received nearly 100 harassing, threatening, and sexually explicit messages in the weeks leading up to his death. These messages came from his high school Snapchat friends, who used anonymous apps to hide their identities. The Internet Watch Foundation made a video that shows a mother preparing dinner. Behind her, a parade of strange men walk through the front door of the house and go upstairs to her teenage daughter's bedroom. They surround her bed, whisper lewd comments, ask her to take off her clothes. They whisper, "Don't be shy." The oblivious mother bustles around downstairs, assuming her daughter is safe because she is at home, but failing to consider what else could be going horribly wrong. Sadly, the internet is a candy shop for predators. Roblox was recently described as a pedophile hellscape by one internet watchdog. Another report showed that Pinterest is rife with adult males who create sex-themed image boards of the little girls that they follow. Arturo Bejar, a former Meta engineer, told U.S. Congress that within a typical week, 1 in 8 adolescents aged 13 to 15 experiences an unwanted sexual advance on Instagram. He said, when you multiply that out by the hundreds of millions of teens who are using Instagram globally, it means that Instagram hosts the largest scale sexual harassment of teens to have ever happened. 94% of kids have watched porn by the age of 14. The UK Children's Commissioner reported in 2023 that because of porn exposure, almost half, so 47% of young people between the ages of 16 and 21 believe that girls expect sex to involve physical aggression. Now think about that for a moment. By giving kids phones, which are portals to porn, whether you like it or not, we are essentially training them to be violent toward women, and we are telling young women that that's what they should expect. In our well-meaning effort to give children access to everything that might be good out there, we have instead given everyone else, both good and bad, access to our children. As actress Sophie Winkleman put it, we left the doors to our children's classrooms, their bedrooms, and their minds wide open to the world. There is no way to keep a child truly safe online. I'm no helicopter parent. My goal is not absolute safety, but right now we've got things backwards. Kids are overprotected in the real world and underprotected in the virtual world. It's time to turn that around. So this leads to the other part of the problem, the secondary harms, the opportunity cost, everything that kids are missing out on because they're on screens, and most critically, the erosion of play in their lives. The average American child spends only 4 to 7 minutes playing outside each day, whereas American inmates are entitled to 2 hours of outdoor time each day. Half of British kids have never climbed a tree. Kids desperately need to play freely in unorganized settings. This is developmental gold, and it serves an evolutionary purpose, to learn as much as possible from each other. Play trains fine and gross motor skills. It develops muscle strength. It teaches young humans how to get along, how to take action, and how to solve problems. Unstructured, unmediated time is important too for the development of creativity. Researchers looking at declining scores for creativity among American children hypothesize that one of the reasons might be their increased use of screens during downtime. As author Christine Rosen writes, rather than being left to their own imaginative devices, their wandering minds are often captured by devices. Free play teaches kids how to handle physical and mental challenges, which builds confidence, a fantastic cure for anxiety. It's a positive feedback loop where parents who see their kids' ability to do things become more willing to let their kids be independent, and those kids then are better prepared for adulthood. Don't get me wrong, the parental urge to protect a child is natural, but trying to shield them from all the ups and downs undermines the goal of childhood, which is to raise an adult. I really love this list of things that an 18-year-old should be able to do. It comes from Julie Lythcott-Hames, former dean of freshmen at Stanford University, who became alarmed by the incoming students' lack of practical skills. She wrote a book called How to Raise an Adult, and it included this list. An 18-year-old should be able to talk to strangers, navigate a new location, manage assignments on their own, contribute to running a household, cope with the ups and downs of life, earn and manage money, and take risks. It's important to recognize that training for all of these things takes years. It's cumulative. And if kids are wasting upwards of 9 hours a day scrolling on their phones, that's a whole lot of time not spent learning how to function optimally in the world. Phones, tablets, and video games have been called experience blockers. The day you give them to a kid might be the last day they'll ever be more interested in anything else. The devices are simply too powerful. They hijack the brain, tantalizing it with unpredictable rewards and novelty, tapping into our primal fear of missing out, taking advantage of our innate curiosity and our laziness. For good reason, they have been called the modern-day hypodermic needle. There are many things that need to be done. We need legislative change, including a higher age of internet adulthood, not 13 as it's been since 1998, preferably something more like 16. We need digital age gating that blocks kids from accessing the violent, addictive, overly mature content that we restrict for them in the real world. But most importantly, we, as individuals, need to start asking ourselves big questions like, what do we value? How do we want to spend our time? How do we want our children to spend theirs? Is this device amplifying or is it amputating my experience of life? This kind of introspection can feel uncomfortable and inconvenient. It's easier just to blame the tech companies for designing addictive products and wait for them to fix it, which they could and should do, but it's not that simple. Even if our devices and our apps were redesigned, we cannot ignore the real dangers that extensive device use poses to our lives. To quote Newport again, there is no way to redeem the technology. Instead, we must fight back by embracing what is good and real and fulfilling in our lives. Now, this is not easy, especially if you're a lone voice amid a sea of enthusiastic phone addicts, or if your child is the only one in their class without a snap handle. But I do want you to know that you're not alone, that many families are tightening up the screen rules at home. You have the right to change your mind based on new information. Your child does not have to agree with you. You are their parent. This is your job, and no one else is coming to save them from a bad phone habit. Kids and devices have been described as a collective action problem. This is when a group would be better off if everyone in the group took a particular action, but individuals are deterred from acting because unless others do the same, the personal cost outweighs the benefit. For example, many kids say they get on social media not because they particularly want to be on it, but because that is where all their friends are and they feel they have no choice. So this is one good example of a collective action problem. A group of researchers at the University of Chicago asked 1,000 college students to consider two different scenarios. Scenario number 1, how much money would it take to deactivate your Instagram and your TikTok for 4 weeks? The average answer was $50. Scenario number 2, how much money would it take to deactivate your Instagram and TikTok if most others did so too? The answer was less than 0, which meant that the participants would have paid the researchers to make this scenario come about in reality because it appealed to them so much. As the researchers wrote in their paper, the students prefer the product not to exist, but they cannot coordinate to stop using it. Another fascinating piece of data is this survey conducted last year that asked over 1,000 American teens what they think of social media. Keep in mind that almost all use it and are on it on average for 5 hours a day. Many wish the products had never been invented. 43% would undo Snapchat if they could. 47% would undo TikTok. Almost half say they will not let their own kids have smartphones before high school. 30% is said to be the tipping point, when it becomes easier for parents to say no to smartphones and to social media, if 30% of the peers don't have it. But reaching that magic number requires parents who are willing to say no, to be early adopters of a philosophy that very much goes against the status quo. In his book, The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt suggests 4 simple norms to resolve this collective action problem. Norm number 1, no smartphones before 14. He says only give a flip phone or a basic phone with no internet connection. Don't give them an iPad either. Norm number 2, no social media before 16. He says let them get through puberty first. Yes, they will miss out on some things, but just think what they're going to miss out on if they're spending 5 hours a day looking at social media. Norm number 3, phone-free schools. He says don't settle for a ban during instructional time only. Anyone who is using their phone is also distracting everyone else around them in the classroom. Norm number 4, more childhood independence and free play, because of course this helps kids to develop optimally. I'm now going to go over my own family's digital media rules, which are a bit stricter than what Jonathan recommends in his book. So number 1, no smartphones before 16. This recommendation comes from Dr. Jean Twenge, who says that owning a smartphone should be on par with getting a driver's license in terms of the level of maturity required to operate one. In our home, we don't have tablets or TV or a video console either. Number 2, no social media before 18. Social media's downsides far outweigh its benefits. And I think if it's serious enough for the Surgeon General to issue an official advisory cautioning us against harm, we really should not be giving it to our kids. Number 3, computers are a great way to communicate. So my kids can still text and participate in group chats and get their fair share of silly memes and videos from an Apple desktop computer that sits in a common area of our home. So my oldest has a laptop that was issued by his high school, something I did push back on initially but was unsuccessful. But I do understand that laptops are less addictive than a touchscreen device. Finally, screen time happens, but on special occasions or sporadically in our home. We have a Netflix account. They can watch a movie on a laptop, but it doesn't happen on a regular basis. For music, there's an old iPhone that stays in our kitchen that is connected to Spotify, and they can use it when they're doing the dishes and cleaning up. To me, this is not anti-tech. This is very much about putting tech in its rightful place. What is the result? Well, kids who are active, who are athletic, who read books, who know how to cook, who can do laundry, who can run errands on their own, carry on conversations with adults and make eye contact, order from a menu with confidence. These are kids with a sense of humor and a keen attentiveness to everything that's going on around them in the household. We're now going to look at some specific age groups, starting with babies and toddlers. And my mantra for this age category is begin as you mean to go on. And I will just say I think that this is absolutely the easiest age group to be screen-free. Kids are little, it's very easy to establish a norm in your household that they will accept and not push back against until they get a bit older. So definitely hold out as long as you possibly can. So my recommendations align with those issued by the American Academy of Pediatrics. No screens before 24 months. Ideally, children will not even see secondhand screens. They won't see their parents on screens, which of course may seem very aspirational, but this is the official recommendation. Limited FaceTime if you have grandparents or relatives that live far away, then it is justified, but otherwise try to keep them off it. Co-view if necessary. Again, counterintuitive because our tendency is to give kids screens in order to occupy them and keep them engaged so that we can do other things. But the fact is, if they are going to watch something, we are supposed to be sitting down and watching it with them and then discussing it afterward. And do not use screens as babysitters. What can you do instead? Well, you can establish a routine. I found this to be very helpful with my own children when they were quite young. A day can feel very long when you have a young child to take care of, but if you break it up into manageable chunks of eating and sleeping and playing, there's less daunting chunks of time that you feel are susceptible to screens. You can get loose part toys. These are open-ended toys that can be interpreted differently based on the child's mood, based on the season, based on who their playmates might be that particular day. You can read books to your child, listen to music, engage with them, get them involved in whatever tasks it is that you are trying to get done instead of just setting them up with an iPad. And go outside. I think that nature is often overlooked as a very effective tool at calming children, distracting children, and wearing them out ahead of bedtime, which is quite useful. Elementary-aged kids, still no smartphones or tablets, no social media, no video games, and limit the screen-based entertainment. What can you do instead? You can give them a talk and text phone if you do need to be able to get in touch with them based on your particular geographic circumstances. You can get a landline. You can use computers for messaging like I described that my own kids do. Lots of outdoor play. Loose part toys, which of course are going to evolve as your kid gets older and develops more skills. Help your kid to get some hobbies, find out what they like to do. You might have to buy them supplies. You might have to model an interest in a hobby yourself, and they will find ways of filling their time. And then realize that boredom is okay. I think often in our society we have this tendency to think that we need to entertain and stimulate our children all the time, and we do not. Children have a marvelous ability to find things to do when they are forced to, and sometimes as a parent you just have to subtract yourself from the situation and let them figure out what that is. With teenagers, no smartphones before 14, ideally 16. No social media before 16, ideally 18. Limit video games and avoid parental surveillance. What can you do instead? You can give them a talk and text phone if you feel they need it. You can have a shared family phone. So I know some families that get a smartphone or a basic phone and they keep it in a common area of the house and it gets loaned out to teens when a teen needs some form of communicating with their parents on a particular day. Still, the landline, that works well in our home. We have a landline. My kids can reach me when I'm out. I can reach them when they're at home. Computers for email and messaging. And then engaging in high-quality leisure activities. This is another great concept from Cal Newport, who does believe that passive relaxation is overrated. High-quality leisure refers to hobbies that are active rather than passive, that use skills to produce valuable things in a physical world, and that require real-world social interaction with other people. So in other words, getting off screens and looking into people's faces. Now, I'm hoping that you're feeling very inspired and you're going to go home and tell your teenagers that you're tightening up the screen rules. Chances are they won't be very happy with you. So what can you say? Here are some sample scripts from Dr. Becky Kennedy. She's a family psychologist who did a partnership with The Anxious Generation. And just two of her suggestions, she has many, you can find the resources online, but one of them is to say, social media isn't an option right now. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know this makes your life harder in some ways, and I know we will get through this. Or you can say, I've learned some new things about a specific app or a behavior, and I am going to change the phone rules. I know this is frustrating, and I know it's important for your safety. I get that this feels annoying to you and will take some time to get used to. Other lines that I have used are, this is just how we do things in our home, or our family's different from other families, or my poor children's favorite, you are welcome to do things differently when you have your own home. Now, I'm also a realist, so I understand that many of you likely have devices in the home that you're not intending to get rid of after this talk. And you might be looking for some guidance on those. So some general rules, the bigger the better. It is actually far better for your child to set up a movie for them on a large screen TV in the living room than to give them a small tablet or a smartphone to watch a movie on or a show on. And that partly has to do with the level of neurological stimulation that happens when the device is being held close to their face versus at a distance. Also, if it's happening on a large screen, it can become communal. Other family members and friends can walk into the room and join them, and then it becomes a less isolating activity than if they're just doing it all alone. Basic is better. Always keep that in mind. Try to find the simplest form of whatever technology it is that you are using. So instead of giving a kid something to read on a tablet, give them an e-reader or give them a physical book. Same with a phone. If you need to be able to reach your child, ask yourself, what is the simplest phone that I can purchase that will allow me to talk to them when I need to? No screens in bed. So we know that exposure to the blue light that is emitted from these touchscreen devices impedes the release of melatonin, the hormone that induces sleepiness. We as adults are told not to look at our screens in the hour leading up to bedtime. Not many of us do that, I realize. But children are even more susceptible to that, so it's important to keep them off it. And also just exposure to stimulating content can make it really hard for a kid to come down. Their minds are just worrying, they're thinking about what they've seen, and it's just not a good combination. No screens in the car. something that we are tempted to do often. But I think that when a child is on a screen in the car, it impedes their ability to locate themselves geographically. And I've heard from some parents that say their kids are worse drivers if they grew up looking at screens because they just don't know how to get around their own towns or cities. They haven't been watching for 16 years. The other thing about no screens in the car is that it's a really good time for kids to just sit alone with their thoughts, to process the events of the day, and to communicate with their parents and their siblings. And as the mother of now 2 teenage boys, I can say that some of the best conversations we have take place in the car, particularly driving at night when it's dark and we don't have to make eye contact and we're both looking straight ahead. There's something about the warm intimacy of that space that causes these boys to open up far more than they normally would with their mother in broad daylight. No screens at mealtime. Again, mealtime is a wonderful opportunity in the midst of our very busy days to come together as a family and to talk about what we've been doing and to learn some basic etiquette too. Passive screens over interactive. This I find very interesting. I didn't know about this until a couple years ago when I was doing some research. Passive screen time is screen time that is watched from a distance. Interactive is anything that you manipulate with your fingertips, so any kind of touch screen device. An interactive device is definitely better at capturing a child's attention immediately, but those same attributes are what lead to prolonged, compulsive, and disordered use. So interactive devices make it harder for a child to come down neurologically and are more likely to lead to tantrums afterwards than, say, watching a movie, which has a natural narrative arc and a very clear ending. So if you are given the choice between giving your child passive screen time or interactive screen time, you should always go with the passive screen time. Another reason is that interactive screen time disrupts sleep more than passive. So one really interesting study looked at the sleep habits of over 2,000 children. They found that it took only 30 minutes of interactive screen time, so iPad time essentially, to disrupt the child's sleep quality, whereas it took 1 hour of passive screen time, watching TV, to have the same effect. I will note too that any claims that an app is educational are completely unsubstantiated. There is no third-party certification that confirms whether or not an app is educational. A company can develop an app, slap a label on it, and sell it in the educational section of the App Store without any kind of verification. So there are better and worse forms of screen time, which I've already alluded to. Good screen time would be a long story that talks about people in a world with moral values, with character development, watched on a larger screen, generally with another person or several people. Bad screen time is fragmented time, watched on a touch screen, in isolation, short, amoral videos that have no character development, just sheer stimulation, and the ability to just jump around as soon as things get slightly boring. Now, if your kid already has a smartphone, I see you as having 2 options. Number 1, you can take it back. I'm sure you saw this one coming. So it is okay to change your mind. You can swap it out for a simpler device. I'm going to go over some options that are available to you. You could choose to maybe let them keep the phone, but just get off social media. And there's a wonderful organization called abstinence.org that's helping older teens and young adults walk back their social media presence. Flip the script on them. So this is something I mentioned in the book club earlier, but I will often ask my kids, if they're giving me pushback on not having these things, I ask them how their own friends are doing. You know, tell me about your friends and what kind of horrific situations they're dealing with their phones and their social media. And inevitably, they will come out with some really shocking tales about things that they're dealing with in school. And it helps to just give a bit of perspective and remind them of why I stand for what I do. And then you could have a smashing ceremony. Now, this is a little extreme, but I like to put this in there to tell you a quick story about a friend of mine, a man who, he's a single dad with a son who's 10 years old, and this boy was struggling immensely with his iPad habit. And as the father told me, their family life had just degraded into a constant state of fighting over this iPad, and the father would confiscate it, and then he'd give it back, and there'd be all these, bribery and manipulation, and the kid would be begging for it, and the dad would feel bad, and this went on for quite a while, and the father said eventually he realized he didn't like the person that his son had become whenever he was on this iPad. So last November, they took it out to the backyard, they took a hammer to it, and the little boy participated in his iPad's destruction. He has never asked for it back since. Now, I'm not advocating for you to go out and take a hammer to all of your devices, but I do think that there is sometimes a time for a very dramatic ending where a young child's brain can comprehend the fact that that device no longer existed, he was never getting it back, and it really helped for him to break this habit, and he has been a lot calmer ever since. If you don't want to take back the phone, you can set new rules. You can establish strict phone-free times and zones. So this could be times like when your kid goes to school. You don't have to send a phone to school with your child. Keep that in mind. It could be during homework, during meal times, maybe when your child is in the car, in their bedroom. You can use computers for chats or social media. So I do know some families that have let their teens remain on social media, but they can only access it from a computer. So it is no longer on an app on their phone. It just creates a little bit of friction. It's a little bit more complicated to have to log in if it's not in their pocket, accessible every single minute of the day. You could also opt to not post, to sort of just have a passive role on social media where you observe, you see everything else that's going on so that you don't feel you're totally out of the loop, but you're not adding to the discussion in any form and opening yourself up to, the criticism that comes along with that. You can implement parental controls. This does work for some families. Personally, I think it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, trying to stay one step ahead of all the kids. They are very smart. They can probably do a better job at dealing with all of this than you ever can. But if you want to do it, I do know that it can be quite effective. You can also you should revisit your family policies on a regular basis, regardless of what your stance is. Kids need to be involved in this discussion. They need to understand why you do things the way you do, and whether they agree or not, at least they will hopefully understand. Now, I mentioned before the big questions that we need to be asking ourselves about the role that we want digital devices to play in our lives. But another part of this is fixing our analog lives, which is pursuing alternative activities that make it easier to ignore the temptation of our technology. Otherwise, you will be fighting a losing battle. Kids cannot do this on their own. If they're used to playing on screens, you will have to go through what's called a replacement phase. And that's when the digital entertainment gets swapped out for real analog toys and in-person activities. You may have to spend more time playing with them initially, just to sort of redevelop those independent play muscles. You may have to invite more kids over, plan outings together, and you may both have to learn not to be afraid of boredom. I have invested in a number of things to get my kids outside. We have a secondhand trampoline, a slack line, a treehouse that we built, a basketball net in the driveway. If you can make your house into an inviting place for the neighborhood kids, they will come. And the benefit of that is also knowing roughly where they are and what they are doing. You also have to get comfortable letting your kids go. This is never easy. Last fall, I let my then 9-year-old ride his bike to a Walmart, which was just over a mile away, to buy a toy on his own. He had to cross 4 lanes of traffic at a traffic light, find the toy in the giant store, and do the transaction. I was nervous the entire time he was gone. He seemed to take forever to come home. But when he got home, he was far more excited about his big outing than he was about his new toy. The same week, ironically, a mother in Georgia was arrested when her 10-year-old son wandered into town on his own without her knowing. He was never in danger, but she was punished for not supervising him every minute of the day. This is a dangerous mentality. This is one that disproportionately harms working and lower income parents, and it cripples children's opportunities for growth. We need to fight back against safetyism, which is this unhealthy obsession with constant supervision. We need to trust our kids. We need to believe in them. Realize, too, that there has never been a safer time to be a kid in history than right now. In fact, a child would have to loiter in public for 750,000 years in order for it to be statistically likely that they'd get kidnapped in a stereotypical stranger in a white van scenario. Furthermore, we should let our kids engage in what is termed risky play, thrilling and exciting forms of play that involve uncertainty of outcome and possibility of physical injury. This includes things like playing at heights, at speeds, with sharp objects, and in places where you could get lost, such as a forest. The Canadian Pediatric Society recently issued a wonderful statement saying that parents should strive to keep their kids as safe as necessary, not as safe as possible. Now, it can be hard to stand by and watch your kid do risky things. If you're nervous, try the 17-second rule. This was recommended by Dr. Mariana Brusoni from the University of British Columbia. She says count to 17 before intervening to see if your kid resolves their dilemma, and they almost always do. Another parent I met very recently told me she uses the red, white, and blue rule. Do not intervene unless you see red blood, white bone, or blue bruises. If you live in an urban area where you don't feel comfortable sending kids out to play, then advocate for the creation of Let Grow play clubs at your school. These are before or after school groups where kids can engage in multi-age, screen-free play that is loosely supervised by an older teen who's sort of like a lifeguard. Some schools have even designated rough play zones where parents sign a waiver and kids who want to wrestle or pile up or throw snowballs are allowed to do so. One principal in New Zealand got rid of all rules on the playground, and he let the kids run wild. Kids could scale fences, climb trees, build with construction materials, and ride scooters. Rates of bullying and serious injury dropped, and students showed improved concentration in the class. So what are some other things you can do at home to curb your tech use? You can try a digital Sabbath, which is a family tech fast for 24 hours each week that applies to parents and kids alike. Everyone powers down their devices, and it's a great chance to reconnect and to discover some shared interests. A timed lockbox can be really helpful to keep phones out of reach. Deposit phones in a basket at the front door. People can still check them, but they have to come to a specific spot to do so. This rule can also apply to your kids' friends when they come over to play, which will encourage better quality hangouts. Sign your kid up for a device-free summer camp. Many parents describe transformed children coming home after a week at camp. They say they have their child back after years of them feeling like a stranger. Assign chores. There's no reason why kids should not be pitching in more around the house. This has become less normalized in our society these days, but there are numerous benefits, from reducing parental workload to training practical skills to occupying time that might otherwise be dedicated to scrolling on social media. You could get a pet. Our string of hamsters has occupied countless hours of my youngest children's attention. They play with her several times a day and build complex mazes out of cardboard. My kids also walk the neighbor's dog for $5 every day. Embrace the mess and the disorder. It's an inevitable part of a play-filled home. There will be toys and half-finished projects lying around, but if you clean them up immediately, you deprive your child of the chance to get back into them. Allow the toys to spread into the main area of your home as well, instead of just relegating them to a distant playroom. Embark on micro-adventures as a family. This is a delightful concept from a British adventurer named Alastair Humphreys, who encourages people to do fun things between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. Yes, he means weeknights. He views this chunk of time as an untapped resource for all sorts of adventures. And if you're stumped for inspiration, think about what you did in the past. Most of us grew up in a pre-smartphone era, and we survived. How did we spend our time? You can buy simpler devices. You're lucky here in the United States. You have a lot more options available to you than we have in Canada. Here are just some of them, gathered together by Katherine Price, who is one of my colleagues at the Anxious Generation team. She wrote an article called The Choose Your Own Adventure Guide to Smartphone Alternatives. Definitely worth checking out. You can also look at a website called dumbwireless.com to see what else is available. If you are worried about the prospect of your child moving through the world without a smartphone, consider this. I once met a mother in Vancouver whose 2 teenage daughters ride public transit every day without smartphones. They tell her that they are hyper alert to the presence of creepy strangers, but they're worried about the other kids who are oblivious to their surroundings. With their AirPods in and their eyeballs down looking at their devices, those other kids have no idea what is going on around them. Who is safer in that situation? The kid with a phone who can hypothetically call their parent as soon as something bad happens or immediately after? Or is it the child who's relying on their ancient neural circuitry, all of their senses, to detect and avoid that danger before it even happens? Our kids are safest when they have been given the wherewithal to navigate the real world without relying on a device. When it comes to tracking kids, some very interesting research out of Europe has found that teens who know that their parents can see their location at all times are more likely to put themselves in dangerous situations. They assume they will always be found. so it's okay to be more reckless about where and what they do. I briefly want to mention the role of personal smartphones in schools. As you will recall, having phone-free schools is one of the 4 norms laid out in the Anxious Generation. Schools that implement bell-to-bell phone bans, where students are physically separated from their devices for the entire day, see a surge in academic performance, more focus, less cheating in class, boosted teacher morale, better social cohesion, less bullying, and a decrease in need for mental health services. Schools can take other steps to discourage phone use. Take a stand in favor of unplugging. Issue a statement of support for families who choose to wait, saying this school applauds all efforts by parents to keep kids screen-free for as long as possible. Make it aspirational. Don't let it be weird. Ask parents not to let their kids bring phones to school in the first place, which would eliminate countless problems. We don't let kids set up TVs on their desks because it would be absurdly distracting. We ban various substances and weapons from entering schools. Why not phones if they are an obstacle to learning? Avoid using social media for any school teams or clubs. Any school-related activity should not require a smartphone or a social media presence to participate, because this is unfair to the families that have made the choice to avoid these platforms. Teams and clubs can use email, a website, or a shared online document instead. And don't use QR codes in class. There was an incident in my son's 9th grade class when a visiting speaker put a QR code up on the board and asked all the students to scan it. My son was the only one who couldn't. He didn't have a smartphone, of course. He got singled out, and the only reason I heard about it was because his teacher called me later that night to apologize for all the teasing that it caused. We parents need to think about the example that we're setting. How much time do we spend on our phones? How often are we distracted when our children speak to us? Do we have interesting offline lives that make adulthood look appealing to them? Do we do fun things? Meet cool people? Talk about smart ideas? There's a great term called digital modesty. Writer Mary Harrington described it as a general disposition to avoid any form of online self-presentation that veers into spectacle. Her rules include no selfies, no pictures of husband or kids, and no discussion of any interpersonal relationship without explicit consent from the other person. This is valuable, as we parents are quick to surrender details without thinking about the potential impact. As parents, we choose what is hard. It may help to reframe your efforts as being more about giving your child back their life instead of letting it be stolen from them by a device. When I hear from my own friends about the horrific things they've faced with their kids, cyberbullying and extreme social media-induced anxiety, as well as multiple suicide attempts, I think I would much rather be arguing with my kid about why he can't have a phone than sitting next to his hospital bed wondering if he's going to make it. I believe that the kids want help. They might complain about you taking away their phone and ruining their life. They might say they hate you. They don't. But many are struggling. This boy posted on Reddit that he wants to do all sorts of things but never does. His daily screen time is around 11 hours. He's 15 years old, and he wrote, "How do I stop this crippling addiction?" There's a growing movement among Gen Z called abstinence, which advocates for a social media-free life. Its tagline says, "Social media is optional. Why isn't anyone telling us this?" More young people are realizing that trying to moderate platforms that are designed to hook us is a fool's errand. Balancing use requires constant maintenance, and it imposes a steep psychological tax. Humans will always be limited by their biology, whereas the technology can improve infinitely. Sometimes it's best just to step away. The pandemic gave us a taste of the digital future that we were promised for so long, and we all hated it. We realized that the things that matter most in life are the real things, the physical things, the outdoor things, the things that bring us face to face with the people we love. We need to beware letting our kids fall back into that world once again. And so, I urge you to be brave and bold. Just because everyone else is doing something does not mean you have to too. You have the right to say no, to change your mind, to insist on giving your child a higher quality childhood than one simply steeped in shallow internet culture. When people tell me that resistance is futile, I say that resistance is the most powerful tool we have, and it might just be the most important gift we ever give our children. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, Catherine. I'll just give a plug that you see the book up here, and it's available, I think, on all of those websites, as well as probably your favorite shopping spot online as well. So Catherine's agreed to take some time for a couple of questions, and I'm happy to share the mic if someone wants to ask. I'll turn that one on in just a second.
So before coming here, I'd actually read Jonathan's book, The Anxious Generation, and so we're planning to do a month of just sort of fast to reset all the dopamine levels and all that type of stuff. But so one of my kids is very much into just reading books as well. So you take away the phone and then she's just entirely on books. And I know the principle behind free play is to not be in there forcing them to do play, but do you have any recommendations towards that, so obviously if she's just reading her books, she's not getting that social interaction, but ways of trying to balance the free play of not telling them what to do versus letting them just go about what they're doing?
Well, I think it's wonderful if she's reading books. I don't think I would try to force it in any other way. I think that I actually wrote an article about how reading does occupy, like kids can't play actively every single minute of the day. And so often the big question is, what do you do when they're not running around playing? And that's where they read books usually, and that's where other parents might choose to give them a screen, but they need to have sort of quiet, calmer activities. It could be crafts, it could be, art activities, it could be knitting, it could be building blocks if they're, So I don't know, I think maybe that's just her personality too. Maybe she doesn't need as much of the, did you say it was a girl? I might be assuming there. She may not need the same level of social stimulation that another child might need and get from the play. So I would say if she's happy reading books, I celebrate that and think that's wonderful. There's someone just behind you who got the mic, and then we can come to you after.
Yeah, I have a question. So I think it's kind of interesting that we're having this conversation in an educational setting, and we have, some representatives here. I guess I'm curious what your recommendations are for getting this data in front of our kids. Like, is there an avenue? Are there efforts being made when we're making these changes around cell phone policy? Like, how are we getting this information into their hands?
I think that's a question for you.
I can go ahead and answer that. Yeah, it's a great question, and it was actually something that came up in our book study just before this. Is how do we make sure that we leverage the data with our children? Not that they're going to absorb that and respect it right away, but at least so that they know it. I actually have a group of high school students. Some of your students might be part of this group. That's a student leadership team, and presented the question about what would it look like if you didn't have cell phones in classrooms. How do you feel about that, and what do you need from the schools to be able to get there? And some very interesting responses, some of them not appropriate, but definitely interested. And it's about some of the most interesting ones were about the feeling of having everyone else doing it around me is certainly more comfortable. So we are starting that initiative to talk to our students about it, to ask them the questions as well, and to plan to get the data in front of them.
I think that a lot of teenagers know that something's really bad, but they might not understand really what it is. So I definitely think it's worth talking to them. Kids need to be told. I think presentations in the school, someone suggested earlier, incorporating it into discussions about mental health and health in general. So I definitely think that could be added to the curriculum, so that they feel empowered too. I think of it sort of as diet. We do talk to kids about how to eat well, but they're not really controlling it because their parents are the ones buying the groceries and cooking the meals. But they still need to be given that knowledge so that they can implement better practices down the road. I think that this is sort of like a digital diet that they need to be taught as well. Yes.
So I'm kind of curious about if, as your boys are growing older, does it become easier for the younger ones to see it kind of progressing through? Does that make sense, that your youngest sees how the older ones have handled not having as smartphones and as much screen time, and does the older one still give the same amount of pushback or does it get easier for you as well?
It does not get easier. Just when you think you figured it out, you realize you definitely haven't. Yeah, the younger ones, I think they definitely are following the footsteps of the older. So they know, like, they will not get a phone before the point that the older one has. And he still hasn't gotten one yet. So they know it's not happening before, 16 at minimum, potentially even not till after high school. Yeah, there's the older one, there's a bit more pushback. He's a boy, so it's different than girls. I think there's definitely some differences there. His friends are actually really wonderful. He's got a great group of friends that does not make him feel bad about the fact that he's not on social media. And they're very willing to do active things during recess. And, when he goes over to their houses. So one thing I will say, actually, often people ask about this. I do not impose my parenting philosophy on other parents. And when my children go to someone else's house, I do not, I don't tell them how I want what I want my kid doing. So my kids play video games, they watch YouTube videos, they do all the stuff that the kids do when they're at another friend's house, and they love it. And then they come back to my house almost with a sense of relief that we do things differently, and they just understand that that's how it is in our home. And it's been a good balance for us because they can keep their finger on the pulse of what's cool, what's trending. They know the memes and the characters and the games and the things that all the other kids are talking about, but it isn't allowed to take over their lives. When other friends come to our house, it's my rules. I have been known to confiscate kids' phones when it's dominating the hangout. Some kids don't like that, they don't come back. Many love it. I think that the kids are very excited to have an opportunity to be able to play offline with other kids who are fully focused and fully present in the hangout. So I would say his friend group flocks to our house. They love our house. They can do so many things. They go work out in the garage. We have a squat rack and, a pull-up bar, and they're out on the trampoline and they're on the slack line and they're eating our food. And it's sort of become this hub of activity. So I think if you can make it sort of appealing, the kids don't push back as much. It works.
Hello. I
Hello.
am curious what the scholars or research shows about things to look for that indicate that a person has developed or is developing a healthy relationship with technology.
Oh, I've never been asked that before. I don't quite know how you'd quantify that.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's what makes it really hard. Like this behavior has developed around it, so I can tell that it's developing health. It seems like a gap in we know what it looks like when it's bad, and we know what it looks like when it's not present, and that seems good. But how do we look for the positive development of a healthy relationship with that tech?
I wonder if you'd almost look at the non-tech side of a person's life. How well developed are they socially? Do they feel content? Do they feel like they're focused? Do they feel like they have hobbies and interests and, not fragmented attention? Can they use the tech as a tool, not as a toy? I think there definitely is a place for it. I mean, I love this modern technology that enables me to do my job and, come and give presentations like that, but it's not taken over my life and, impinging on conversations that I'm having with people. But I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah. Something that needs to be looked at for sure.
Thank you.
One more question.
Hello. I'm sure we are all aware of how we're in the midst of a huge technological leap that is happening in the next year or two with AI. And my question is, and this is for me as an adult as well, but how do we navigate AI with children, teenagers, adults, where it's enhancing education and not hindering it or becoming dependent on it? How do you see, and I don't know if that's up and coming, but how do we use it safely, I guess?
I don't know the answer to that. I feel like that's something new I've started hearing about. We've all just started hearing about this very recently. I don't know. I wonder if can education
Sure.
people speak to that more about what you're specifically doing
I
here?
think maybe not specific, broadly specific, but specific within the district is we've had an AI work group with parents, educators, several student feedback as well around AI, because it is out there. And it's being used in the job market as well. So how do we prepare our students for their futures, knowing that AI is going to be something that they're going to need to rely on in the workforce, while keeping them safe at the same time? And so OSPI, our Superintendent of Public Instruction, has offered actual guidance around that. And we're launching into that next year at the low end, I would say, of immersion. And that part of that guidance is to say that if we're going to use AI in the classroom or outside the classroom even, we're gonna say it's a human, AI, human. So human input, AI help, human output on the outside. So not total reliance on AI, but to have that human interaction on both sides of it is a good place to start. And I know that doesn't answer your question, because we have the same fears. It's changing so quick that's going on. The other thing I'll say is right now, our network filters AI, without proxies or anything like that, but it filters AI for students right now.
I would just add that I think the same principles that I use in my whole philosophy would still apply. Push back against it as a parent. I think it's really important to establish this baseline, which is the children understanding that the analog world is a wonderful, beautiful place to live in, that they can trust their own opinions and thoughts on things, not have to, rely on the AI to give them input. I also don't buy the whole argument that kids need to be exposed to this technology from a young age in order to be successful professionally. It's developing so fast. It won't look anything like it does now by the time they enter the workforce in a number of years. It's also designed to be intuitive. They're going to pick it up later. I think what really matters is teaching our kids the skills that set them apart from the machines, the skills that make them human, and that's going to basically put them at an advantage, I think, in the future.
Thank you. I want to just ask one question, because I was about to give a plug for an app that we're offering in the district, a free app for all families around, and it's called Custodio, and it's basically an internet monitoring device. But I noticed for both personal devices and district devices at home. But I noticed on one of your slides you said no parent monitoring. Do you mind talking about that?
Oh, parental surveillance. I think I was talking about tracking your child's location through a smartphone. So a lot of parents will give their kids a smartphone to be able to see where they are.
Self-included.
Yeah, I think that could...
When we had teenagers, self-included, right?
It can get in the way of... I think you have to ask yourself why you're doing that.
Right.
And really, maybe you have to work on developing your child's skills to be able to go out in the world on their own. And kids need to individuate from their parent. They need to develop, they need to be a part, and they need to know that the parent's not watching them. And as I mentioned before, the interesting statistics on kids actually putting themselves in danger because they have an artificial sense of safety because they're being watched. So
I have to say, as a parent, when we finally got rid of Life 360, I don't know how many of you have that for you, I felt much better. The last thing I'll mention is, and it was brought up a little bit, is there is, and I'll call it a group of parents at Utsalati Elementary who have started the Wait Till 8th initiative. And the Wait Till 8th initiative, they are an actual site now that if they get 10 families or more, they are a bona fide site where they get resources, and it's a commitment that you're not going to give your child a smartphone until 8th grade or 14 years old. So if you're interested in that, this individual said they'd be happy to walk anyone through the process. You can email me and I'll connect you with them. It's the Wait Till 8th initiative, and I think it pairs very nicely with what Katherine has been talking about tonight. I just want to say thank you for traveling all the way that you did. It's a long way, and for the the information that you've given us in advance of us kind of ramping up and being able to help our youth more and more every day. So appreciate it, Katherine.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's a great crowd here tonight. There's a lot happening in the district and the community, so I just appreciate everyone taking the hour plus to come out and be part of the conversation. And if you'd like to continue to be part of the conversation as we move along, feel free to be in contact with me, and we will certainly keep you connected. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.